Welcome, everybody, to the Big Book Roundtable in the RICO 12 family of recovery resources targeted at people from all backgrounds, faiths, and places dealing with addictions of all varieties. RICO 12 is also a resource for the loved ones of addicts. I'm Justin B., a child of an all powerful and all loving God and a multidisciplinary addict, living in the miraculous recovery that is promised to those who, well, strive to practice these principles in all our affairs. And I'm sitting here with a couple of other spearheads and just rock stars around this round table, David G. and Nikki M. David, why don't you introduce yourself real quick and then we'll jump over to Nikki.
Absolutely. Thank you, Justin, for your service. And Nikki, good to be here with you as always. I'm David G. from Oklahoma. I'm alcoholic and an addict of many sorts. Very grateful to be here today. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Nikki, you're up.
Hi, everybody. And yes, this is a bright spot in my day, seeing these two gentlemen, men of God, sitting across from me at this round table. And I'm Nikki M, and I'm just a grateful member, and I'm just a loving child of God who's doing her best and trying to perform this work well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, David. I'm excited to continue this conversation with you. Last time we left off at the top of page 20 in the Big Book in the chapter, There is a Solution. We're going to pick up from there and read about a page. So everybody out there in podcast world, grab your big books, a pen, a marker, a highlighter, and get ready to take some notes. Get ready to start applying these principles as we learn them and dive into them in a more deep fashion. Once again, we'll be reading from page 20 in the fourth edition of the Big Book. Here we go. You may already have asked yourself why it is that all of us became so very ill from drinking. Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. We shall tell you what we have done. Before going into a detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. How many times people have said to us, I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow just can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl. I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him that if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. Moderate drinkers may have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have a good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time, if a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, changing of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative. This man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome, and may even need medical attention. Okay, so this is the section we're talking about today, and we've only hit on two types of alcoholics. We've got three that are identified here in this section here, and maybe more, but we're going to save that next one for the next episode here. But what I'd like to do, David and Nikki, is just kind of go through this and talk about what we're reading here, maybe a little history behind it, your own experience, strength, and hope. David, tell us a little bit about some of the things you take out of this reading that we just went through.
Okay. Well, I love this part of the book because we're still talking about the physical allergy, not so much the mental obsession yet. That's going to come in the next couple of pages, that the main problem centers in the mind, not the body. It's also going to say that, that it's academic and pointless. And, if we never took the first drink. So really everything up to this point that we're reading over to page 23, we're really looking at the allergy here. And so our book says you may have already asked yourself, why? Why did I become so very ill from drinking? And that was one of the questions that I had whenever I came here, prior to coming here and Hell, even a while after I'd been here, nobody had really introduced me to the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the contents herein. Curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion. Always my favorite words in the Big Book. We have recovered, not recovering. We have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body, not alcohol, not sex, not food, not men, women, whatever it may be. We have recovered from that which drives us to do all that stuff to begin with, and that's a hopeless condition of mind and body. Now, I was led to believe by self and other people supporting those facts for a long time that my spirit was sick, body, mind, spirit. But as I read this book, I don't really see where my spirit is sick. Now, people say, David, that's BS, because on page 64, it says that we have a spiritual disease. But if you read the book very closely, it says that we have a spiritual disease because of a human condition, and that's called self. And we're going to look at the manifestations of that as we move through the book. And Justin read it right here. It's the purpose of the book. If I want to know what I have to do, it's the purpose of the book. It's not the fellowship. It's not my sponsor. All of these things are helpful, but it is the purpose of this book to answer those questions specifically. So as important as other people are and the things that they may have to say and the experience that they have, I'm going to let the book be my answer, because this is where I make contact with a power greater than myself. And I like what they say. We shall tell you what we have done. That's talking about the first 100 men and women who put this down. They're going to tell us what they've done. But before they go into a discussion, they're going to summarize some points as we see them. And it's going to ask us some questions. How many times have people said to us, I can take it or leave it alone? Right there, for me, being an alcoholic, being a sex addict, being all these other things, right there tells me that I'm different. Because, see, I can't take it or leave it alone, either one. The book says, why can't he drink like a gentleman or quit? That's the same as it is with lust. I've had people tell me, why don't you just quit that? And my first sponsor used to say this, why don't you get a box of stool softeners, eat the whole thing, make a pot of coffee and drink it. And when that shit hits, and I promise you it's going to, just quit. Just quit. Stop that. Cut it out. That's probably not going to happen. And that's kind of how we are as addicts and alcoholics. That's probably just not going to happen. So, and he goes through all these scenarios, his willpower must be weak. And a lot of people think that. They really do. I promise you, alcoholic and addicts are some of the strongest willed people that I've ever met. There's really not a whole lot weak about that. This refers to me more of the choice. And we're going to talk a lot about choice in the upcoming of this. She's a sweet girl. I think that you should stop for her sake. Man, I think I'm one of the sweetest gals around. And I promise you, that's not enough to stop me in the midst of my addiction from doing what I do. So it says, here's commonplace observations, which we hear on drinkers, which we hear all the time. And we hear it even in the rooms. But this is why, because in the back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding, and that's because of self. But here's the key for me. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reaction are very different from ours, and I've met a lot of them in the room. So you gave two examples here. The first one was a moderate drinker. They have a little trouble in giving up liquor entirely. If they have a good reason, they can take it or leave it alone. And that's to have a choice. You have a choice whether or not you do what you do, and that's okay. But for those of us who have lost the power to choose, we can't take it or leave it alone. And then the certain type of hard drinker, I've seen people like this, even in the rooms. And I've listened to their stories many times. I had an uncle that was really bad. I would swear to God he was an alcoholic. I mean, he would break out in sores all over his body, pass out on the sidewalk, sleep in town, But the day come when his health got really bad and he decided that he was going to quit, and he did, and he never went back to it again. And I could really never understand that. But as I read these two examples very carefully, there's one thing that these guys have that we don't, especially with this hard drinker, type number 2 that Justin read about. And he says he may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him mentally and physically. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. Strong reason, ill health, falling in love, changing, all of this. He's the guy that that says, hell, I was in the Navy for 30 years, drank myself to death, and one day I decided to quit, and I quit, and I never went back, and so can you. What I see here, this man doesn't have the allergy. He has the mental obsession. He has the habit badly enough to gradually impair him in a lot of areas, but he does not have the habit. And what we'll read in drinker number 3 coming up in the next episode, this happens once he starts to drink. He begins to lose all control. See, this guy, at some point, life will get bad enough to where he'll quit. Now, an alcoholic with the allergy, that's probably not going to happen without a spiritual experience, according to our book. The doctor says it very clearly that, once the psychic change has occurred, the very same man that seemed doomed, he now can do the things that this man can do without having the psychic change. So anyway, that's my share on that. Thank you for calling on me, Justin.
Yeah, thank you, David. And there's some good stuff in there. I've written down a couple of thoughts that I'm going to ask you about here in a few minutes. But before I do that, Nikki, tell us some of the takeaways and some of the thoughts you have as we read through this passage.
Well, thank you so much. And I love to hear David G., speak this book. And when you read it over me, always, as I say, Justin, it's a new experience. I'm actually not at home with my big book. I've got my little purse-sized book because we're recording on a different day and time today. So I have lots of thoughts in this moment. I can hardly see the printing. And I have different notes in this book. But what I have, because I know this page because I've been here 12 years and I won't go. It talks about why. And as I come in here, remember, I entered the rooms through Al-Anon because I'm here on this page with my guy. Why can't you quit? Why don't you be like other people? Don't you love me? I'm a sweet girl. Can't you stop for me? Why? So, right at the top, it says, why do we become so very ill? And then once I realized that I suffer the disease of alcoholism too, my book says, why? Why do I become so very ill from my thinking? Because I don't even drink. I become very ill in my thinking. If you're just listening to this podcast and you don't know much about me, I cross out in my big book, my Bible for Survival, I put over the DR a TH because my thinking will kill me. And expert opinions to the contrary, this is the properly appointed authorities, about why and how and how we have, because remember, we're hopeless. I'm hopeless. And how did I recover? It doesn't, and I love what David says, not recovering. I have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. Yes, I get a daily reprieve contingent. And then it's like, what do I have to do? Because number one, I came in here 12 years ago, like, what does this guy have to do to get better so my life's okay? So I'm okay. What does he have to do so Nikki's okay? But the reality is, what do I have to do? And then as David, and the book says it all. This is the purpose of the book. Well, this is exactly what this book is about, to answer these questions specifically. The book is very specific. It does not mince words. It's a magic book. And this is where you guys in the rooms, and if you have a great sponsor, they'll tell you what they've done. They're going to, and I love this line, before going into detailed discussion. See, I don't do that even with my sponsees when I get them. I don't get into detailed discussions because I've read the book. I'm armed with the facts. And I'm certainly not going to listen to anyone who can't differentiate the true from the false. So I do summarize some points, not these points, but other points. I mean, these are instructions. And my line out here with all the whys and the whys and the whys, I see where religious people are right, what my book tells me to do later on. And in step 11, we seek God. And one of my friends said today, someone was asking, they were in a group discussion in a meeting, why am I an alcoholic? Why? Well, it's a gift because, God wants me to get close to him. And what's the best way for me to get close to God? Through suffering, through addiction, through the self, the disease of self, and here it is. It's, the why? It's always because I am in a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. Why did this happen? Even because it says it will solve all my problems. Why COVID? Well, I'm in a world of ignorance an misunderstanding. So I need to misunderstand. I need to get understanding. I need to get armed with the facts. So down here at the bottom, type 1, that's what I always have. Type 1, the moderate drinker, thinker, the moderate addict. They have little trouble. As David said, they have choice. They can take it or leave it. I am a type 1 gambler. To you gamblers out there, I can go into a casino. I worked in Bullhead City, Arizona, and I could go in and spend $20. And after I lose that $20 because of my worship of money, I am running from the casino. And it's funny, today I was with my sponsee, and we were talking about this exact section. And he said, no, Nikki, I'm not a type 1 gambler. I can't, no, I'm not a type 1. And we didn't find each other in Gamblers Anonymous. We found each other in another room. So you got to get through all the addictions and the afflictions with your sponsees. So I'm a type 1 gambler. He's a type 3. Then we have a certain type. The hard, heavy thinker, user, drinker. What about them? And I said, I'm a type 2 drug addict. I literally could do crystal meth. No one saw me for years. And then I got pregnant. And all of a sudden, that doesn't exist for me anymore. I'm having a baby. And the guy I'm sponsoring today, he can for sufficient reason, let that woman go. I'm not letting you go. I'm boiling your phone, your bunny, and I'm taking you hostage, and we're going to live together forever. Now, I'm not that. I'm a real hardcore sex and love addict. So he's a type 2 sex love addict for sufficient reason. I can stop. I'm a type 2 food addict. When my butt gets big, when my arthritis starts kicking in because I'm 50, I'll stop. So I can't wait to get about what about the real addict? And I love, we'll read further on. Our behavior patterns vary. So if you're in the room and you're looking at me, don't. Because my behavior pattern varies different than yours. Other areas, Justin and David, I'm a real addict. But in other areas, water off a duck's back. I can have the power of choice. I can take it or leave it alone.
Thank you for sharing all that, Nikki. There's some good stuff here. And I've got a couple of questions that I want to ask each of you, because there's things in here that were said by each of you that just, I want to push back a little bit, but also just get a little bit deeper, experience strength and hope. David, I want to start off with you. You said you love this recovered. We have recovered. When does one know that they have recovered? What's the progress look like between full-blown addict, abstinence, sobriety, recovery, recovered? How does that look in your life? Let's say in your life.
Well, thank you for that question, Justin. When the obsession of the mind no longer drove me to either put in my body or to take behaviors based on what I was thinking, when that no longer dominated my life, I knew that I had recovered from a hopeless state of mind. Now, I've never recovered from alcohol. I've never recovered from drugs or sex or lust or any of that. But what I've done is recovered from a condition of mind that drove me to do that, to put those things in my body, which created the allergic reaction that demanded more of the same. When we get to page 85 of the book, well, let me back up. Let's say page 45 of the book. It says, we have, lack of power. That's our dilemma, not lack of belief or choice or any of this. It's a lack of power. But by the time we get to page 85, it tells us that we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. And for the longest time, I thought that meant that I was being protected from alcohol and drugs and lust and all that. But really what happened was I had been put in a place of neutrality, safe and protected from the things that drove me to do that. And that was the hopeless condition of mind and body that no longer existed. The problem had been removed. And I kept thinking, well, hell, the problem's alcohol, the problem's this, it's been removed. No, I'm batshit crazy at 25 years sober and about to die in this very room that I'm sitting in today. That don't have shit to do with drinking and drugging. That has everything to do with a hopeless state of mind. See, when I read the fifth tradition, the only requirement, is for those who are still suffering. I thought that was only talking about the newcomer. No, there's a lot of people in the rooms with double-digit sobriety that are dying from a hopeless state of mind. And so for me, that no longer exists. It just doesn't. As long as I stay close to the daily disciplines in 10, 11, and 12, I continue in step 11 to seek this power and to do his work and help others. I've recovered from that hopeless condition of mind and body, not the drugs and the alcohol, the sex, the lust, the food, all that stuff. That was the effects. That was not the cause. That was the flea. It was not the dog. And so we're going to, as we read through here, we're going to see more and more and more what we actually recover from. And it's not drinking and drugs. Thank God, because I would have had no solution, no answer at 25 years to why I was so damn crazy. So anyway, thanks for calling on me, Justin.
Got it, David. And I really look forward to gaining a greater understanding and a bigger picture vision of this. It's not drugs and alcohol. It's not lust and sex that I'm recovering from. It's the self. And I look forward to really seeing that more clearly as you and I and Nikki walk through this. Thank you for sharing that. Nikki, I'm going to do a little pushback here. You talked about, hey, I'm a type 1 of this, a type 2 of that. I can take it or leave it, or I can, and when the pain gets enough, I can step away. And it's not that I'm pushing back and saying you're an addict in those things. I'm saying, how does one person, how would I determine, hey, I'm a type 1, a type 2, or I'm a full-blown addict of the type 3 variety in this area, without really going through this program of recovery? Talk to us about that.
Well, that's a great question. And the truth is, it really doesn't matter what type you are, because as we all suffer the disease of self, that's what that looks like. Like, we all are real overthinkers. Once we start, we can't stop. And that thought then leads us to the behavior, which leads us to do whatever we do. But why it's important, I found, and when my sponsor, who does this, 30-page workbook, he used to have this in the workbook when he first took me through it. And then he took it out, and I thought, no, I'm not going to be able to teach this without this, because people need to know this. And now, as I'm, 8 years sponsoring this certain method, people don't need to know if they're what they are. They need to know that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of their trouble, that self is the root of their trouble, that they need to know that they're driven. That's all on page 62, what drives them. They need to know that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. But why is this helpful specifically, especially when we're in different rooms? Because it's like someone will look at Miss Al-Anon and go, well, she can have a glass of wine, so she shouldn't be in AA. She can go to Christmas party and have that glass of wine. But Miss Al-Anon wants to kill herself because she can't stop once she starts thinking and getting into fear about what's going to happen. Does that make sense? Like, this is really serious stuff here, because it's like, well, why can that person do that? How can that person, is sex and love rooms? I went and met a sponsee real quick, some experience, strength, and hope. She was an alcoholic addict, and she would not take anyone through the steps who drank, smoked, ate different foods, because she was in all the programs. And it's like, but our behavior patterns vary. I don't have a problem with that. So why would you have to stop drinking and smoking and doing all these things, whatever it may be that the sponsor said? That's not what it is in the book. Now, can you do anything and get to God? Can you sit there? And this is right to the Al-Anons. Can you go and get more than one glass of wine or two, which blotting out the consciousness of your existence, and still connect to this power? That's a big hell no. Can you use, that's a hard no for drug addicts and alcoholics. You can never touch it again. But what does it look for other people who can take it or leave it, but need to be in the rooms because they're suffering from the disease of alcoholism? Or as my friend David said, he was dying 25 years in the rooms. And these are the kind of people I sponsor, because I see them. But I'm sober, Nikki, I'm sober. But you've slept with every newcomer. You have no money, and you were in the mental institution for trying to commit suicide on your 17-year chip. How does that work? So I get, the type 1, am I digressing? I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. Long story short, does it really matter? At the end of the day, no, because you're disconnected from this power. But why does it help? Because we're armed with facts about ourselves. I'm understanding this disease of alcoholism. It shows up differently in all of us. Does that make sense, Mr. Pushback?
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Thanks for walking me through that, and I really appreciate that because I sometimes I am guilty of saying I don't think you're really an addict. I don't know that you really belong in these rooms. Well, maybe they do. Maybe in order to recognize that they're not really an addict of a sex addict, a food addict, an alcoholic, whatever, but they still suffer from the disease of selfishness, and self-centeredness, and just the disease of alcoholism. All right, let's jump into some takeaways here. David, what is a takeaway that you have from our reading that you can apply into your life, or maybe a lesson to teach others from what we just talked about?
Well, I think that, for so long I came in and I judged the outsides by what I was feeling on the inside. It really wasn't until I got into this book and really began to look at all the different things that it's telling us here that I began to see where most of us are the same in one area, not several. We've talked a lot about the allergy. And in the doctor's opinion, it says, we may be full flight from reality, maladjusted to life, all of this. And then he goes on later to say that all of these and many others have one symptom in common. You cannot put whatever it may be into your body without beginning to have this reaction. So really what I see through all of this that we've read and what I take away is it's not the mental behaviors that make us different. If you're an alcoholic and you're listening to this today and you've been sober for a long time, God forbid that you drink today, you're probably going to react somewhat differently than me and other alcoholics. Some will want to fight, some will want to love, some will cry in their beer. But the one thing remains the same. Once we put it inside of our body, there's something that is going to demand more of the same. And we're reading about that here. These drinker, the type 1, type 2, basically, one has progressed a little more mentally than the other, but the fact of the matter still remains that once they put it within, they can't stop. And that taking a drink of lust will do that to me. If you're a food addict and once you start, I believe today, sitting right here, almost 30 years sober today, you could throw a glass of beer on me, and I promise you I'm not going to fall out of here drunk, but let me put that in my mouth and swallow it down into my body, and something's going to happen that don't happen to the regular man. I'm going to break out. So if I take anything away from this, it's that mentally we're all different. Physically, we're all the same because of the allergic reaction. And we're going to read more about that as we move on. So thanks, Justin.
And thank you, David. Nikki, how about you? What's a takeaway for you from our discussion and reading today?
Well, I wrote one thing down when David was talking, and my takeaway really, when he was the first round, which was the purpose of this book. And I have a little, I love to sing, you guys. And it's like, what does the book say? Not what does the room say? Okay. And that's really what this is about. My takeaway is the purpose of this book is to give me a greater understanding, overstanding of this disease of alcoholism. If you ask me, this should be the basic text in all schools, especially university, so people can understand and get compassion for themselves and for others. Because, the why? Well, it's in the book. So read the book, believe it. And miracles can happen for everyone who's listening.
Thank you, Nikki. And my takeaway was something that we didn't hit too much on, but as I was reading, this phrase really hit me hard today based on an experience I had. And I'll share a little experience, strength, and hope on this. But his willpower must be weak. I have a new sponsee, and he shared with me a filtering software that he's been using a while, and asked me, "Hey, will you be an accountability partner for me?" And I don't typically jump in on these things, but I said, "Hey, show me what you got." And he sent it over, and I read it's like this community thing where people staying off porn is basically what it is. And I was reading the comments in there, and almost every single comment said, "Oh man, you're doing great. Just have a little bit more willpower. Just more willpower." And I was like, dude, there's something wrong with that. Why doesn't he have enough? His willpower must be weak. You know what? If I am an addict of a type 3 addict that we'll talk about here in a minute, willpower does nothing. And even a type 2 addict, willpower does almost nothing until the pain is so great that then the willpower does something. But man, if I'm relying on willpower, I'm a dead man. I'm a dead man as an addict of the hopeless variety. So anyways, that's my takeaway from this. And everybody, we're so grateful that you've joined us here on this Big Book Roundtable. Thank you, David. Thank you, Nikki. Everybody, keep coming back. Commence shoulder to shoulder with us as we trudge this happy road of destiny. Work it. You are worth it.